Hey, Happy New Year! And welcome everybody to your Rouxbe live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction here at Rouxbe. I'm also one of your chef instructors in the courses. And today I want to, in particular, welcome you to my office hours. This is your chance to ask questions that are related to food and cooking, and I'll do my best to provide a response. And if you come up with something that stumps me, I'll probably circulate it among my teammates here on the instructional team. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into today's activities. As usual, I want to mention a couple of items. And, the first is on the right-hand side of your page, you'll see some pre-populated questions. And if you'd like to participate more directly, feel free to enter a question or even a comment in the dialog box in the upper right corner of your screen. And the other item is, as you look at the individual questions down below, you'll see a heart-shaped icon in the upper right-hand corner of each question. And if you would like that question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on that, and that'll push the question up in priority. Okay. I'm going to jump into the questions next, but I also want to mention that, since we're starting out the year of the dragon, beautiful new year, that if you care to share a food related, health related, resolution, I'd be happy to read those. Now, I hesitate to use the word resolution, or at least focus on that. I mean, I suppose that's what it is to some folks. But I do like to use this time of the calendar to revisit, some of the things that I have committed to or would like to do, and sometimes I'm still doing these things consistently, and I just kind of revisit them in my head to see if I'm satisfied with my progress, the direction I'm going. Other times during the vacation, my diligence gets a little sloppy around the edges, and so it is a good time to regroup. But at any rate, if you're doing something that's, for example, food related, share if you'd like. All right. But without further ado, let me go ahead and jump in, and we'll take a look at today's questions from all of you. And let's see. The first one is from Kristen. Hello. Do you have any vegan and grain-free travel or lunch ideas? Thank you and Rouxbe for great information. Grain-free meal ideas, lunch ideas. So, what comes to mind for me will be all the vegetables and fruits included, that are a part of the beautiful world, right, that we live in. And certainly grains make up a huge number of options for many of us, but even I think more so than the edible grains that we find on the market are all the fruits and vegetables. And so when I think about some meal ideas, I think about roasted vegetables. And a couple of categories come to mind, and one would be root vegetables, and these could be the various and sundry potatoes, waxy potatoes of different types, and also other root vegetables like parsnips and rutabagas and turnips. You come across radishes, and there are some large radishes that we might associate with East Asian cookery. For me, in particular, Japanese and Korean cuisines such as daikon, and there are other similar radishes that can be consumed in different ways. It can be shredded and eaten raw in salads. They can be put into soups and simmered. There are also sweet potatoes. I'm a big fan of sweet potatoes, and in particular, I enjoy seeking sources for purple sweet potatoes. And there are some different varieties out there. Some are indeed very deep purple or violet color through and through. Others are lighter and sort of have a variegated off-white and purple look, and levels of sweetness vary. As you search for these sort of things, look for examples that are relatively heavy for their size, which translates to higher moisture content, which is going to be desirable. And when of course, there's always multiple ways to cook things, but the way that I handle sweet potatoes anyway is very simply, I'll put them in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and on a sheet pan, and I just leave them in there. And usually it's in an hour or well over an hour until some of the syrup starts to ooze out. And that tells me that the interior is nice and soft, and the sugars have been coaxed out. And at that point, boy, they're great as a meal on their own, as a snack, as a dessert. You can dress them up if you like. One of the simple recipes representing Okinawan cuisine in our Blue Zones course recommends mashing some purple sweet potato, drizzling it with some coconut milk, perhaps a pinch of salt, and some toasted sesame seeds. The color, your choice. And that makes a very earthy, grounding, and flavorful, and certainly satisfying meal or side item. And then, of course, there's so many other vegetables, whether it's a cauliflower or broccoli or asparagus when it's in season. All of these things can be either roasted or it could be steamed or simmered. Your choice. Of course, dry heat cooking methods such as roasting will impart some color, or at least you have the ability to control that, and color equals flavor. And so very often we will recommend that you at least give it a try. Some people like steaming because it's pretty quick and tends to preserve colors and nutrients in certain ways. So I think the next step then is to think about what you might flavor or garnish or dress those vegetables with. And I will sometimes use a little dollop of an Indian pickle, of which there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 varieties in the fridge at any time here at home. It could be tahini. I'm a big fan of tahini, a little toss in tahini with a squeeze of citrus juice, whether it's an orange or a lemon or a lime, tends to work for me. And try things like Japanese furikake, which are these multi-component little sprinkly items that are designed originally for enhancing white rice, but can be used in so many ways, including vegetables. And so those are just a couple of ideas that come to mind, and I hope that you'll find, something that might work for you and inspire you to do some experimenting. Thank you. And next up, I got a question from Ingrid, who says, how do you manage pork so it does not get very dry? People complain a lot about this meat, but also chicken breast having a dry taste. Okay, so when when you say pork and dry, we're really talking about a couple of muscles usually, and that would be the loin and the tenderloin, which are very common muscles of the pig that many people enjoy. And those are a couple of muscles that are on the backside, running along the length of the torso, and it's an area that is lean and also relatively tender. And I'll give you just a little introduction to that that area of the body before I answer more directly your question here, Ingrid. The basic guideline is when it comes to animal meat, animal muscles, and locations on the body, muscles that are not exercised much, and that will be muscles that are in this torso area, very often around the back. Um, they're just kind of along for the ride, and so they don't get a lot of exercise. They don't get very tough. They remain relatively tender. And now another thing is that with the low level of activity, the flavor development is also low. That's why with something like a pork loin, we will most always serve it with a sauce, because on its own, there's not a tremendous amount of flavor. Okay. Now, if we compare that to the muscles of locomotion, such as the pork butt, which is located right here, it's going to be part of the shoulder musculature. There's a lot of activity and a lot of connective tissue that's developed. It's relatively tough and flavorful. And the way that pigs are raised, at least in the US, there's a lot of marbling and otherwise fat development. And so those cuts, they do very well in a dry heat environment where that heat can break down the connective tissue, exposing the flavor of the muscle, while the fat that's present acts as a lubricant and also a carrier of the flavor, and can produce some very beautiful meals. But back to the pork loin and the tenderloin. Again, these low fat muscles that can get dried out very quickly. Okay, so when we come across dry meat, it is due to overcooking. And there are a couple of things to keep in mind when you're handling pork loin and tenderloin. And the first thing is it's going to be best to cook those things, we're talking about a dry heat environment that they're typically handled in the oven. And you want to use a moderately low temperature. 350 degrees would be probably the highest that I would recommend. And you can certainly drop it down from there, to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have the time, 300 degrees, can work as well. That's going to draw out the cooking time. So you might want to practice a bit to understand, what that balance looks like. And so what happens if you put this kind of a muscle into a high heat environment is that the surface of the meat will very quickly dry out due to evaporation. Okay, and so we're going to get some toughness on the exterior. The other thing that happens is as the muscle heats up, it starts out slowly absorbing heat, and then as it gets toward the degree of doneness, it tends to ramp up pretty quickly. And so if you want to pull it at a certain point, and that temperature is coming up, and then starts to shoot up quickly, you got to be really on your toes to pull it out of the oven. Now, in order to avoid going past that ideal temperature and experience even further dryness. So there's a couple of things going on that lead me to recommend that cooking at a slightly lower temperature, like not 400, not 375, consider 350, perhaps a little bit lower than that, degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. The other thing is, as meat gets cooked further, and certainly to the point of being a little overdone, that change in the molecular structure of the meat pushes out moisture, and you get this toughening effect. And so it's going to be, first of all, it's possible, okay, to cook both chicken breast and pork loin and tenderloin to the point where it's just right. It's got moisture, which is important for mouthfeel. It's not overcooked, so it's not dry, and it's been cooked, in a reasonable temperature environment so that the exterior isn't chewy either. Okay. Now, in order to mitigate some of this external drying, an old technique is to bard the roast, and to bard means to add or attach thin layers of fat to the meat, and that bastes the meat while it's roasting. And today it can be a challenge to get our hands on simply fat. And so another great alternative is going to be slices of bacon. And then you can just, if you're barding with just fat, you'll probably elect to remove that at service time before you fabricate the meat for service. If it's bacon, take a look at it when it comes out of the oven. You can certainly leave it on. If that's going to be part of an enhanced presentation, there's certainly going to be some flavor there. Or you might choose to remove it. Your choice, okay? But it takes some practice, and use a thermometer to check the temperature and ensure that your thermometer is calibrated. Okay, very often we'll have one of these small Insta-read thermometers, which are very convenient, but they go out of whack, due to maybe being bumped around or dropped on the kitchen floor. And so they do need to be calibrated from time to time. And the easiest way to do that is to insert the stem into a generous cup or container of ice water. It needs to have a lot of ice so that water can be brought down to 32 degrees. And then stir with the stem. Take a look at the dial, and it should read 32 degrees. And if you're off one way or another, go ahead and make that adjustment while the stem is still in the ice water. Okay, and then that's going to ensure the most accurate results when you measure the temperature of your food. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Have patience with this because it does take practice, and you can get there. All right, have fun. Thank you. All right, next up is from Balbina. Hello. What an impressive profile you have. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you have any recommendations for where would be best to do an internship as a new graduate from a plant-based culinary course at VegChef, preferably in Europe? I will highly appreciate your insights. Well, Balbina, thank you for the question. Now, offhand, sorry to disappoint, offhand, I don't have any ideas for Europe. However, perhaps one of my colleagues does. And so if you wouldn't mind, could you please reach out with your same question at support@rouxbe.com, and I will circulate your question among the instructional team, and we'll get back to you. Thank you. And next up from Bob, who writes, when dicing high moisture items like celery, the offcut can stick to your blade. They can build up until one falls off, usually at a bad angle, into the path of your blade, ruining that piece. What's the best way to keep your blade clear while dicing? Yes, that is indeed a common occurrence. And so, a couple of things come to mind. So number one, let me just answer your question directly. And that is to say that the blade will need to be, wiped with a hand or, on the edge of your container in some fashion every couple of slices, or sometimes every slice, depending on what it is that you're doing, in order to keep the blade clear of these pieces that can fall into the path of the blade. Okay. Now, the other part of my response is that there are certainly contexts where maybe it's not such a big deal, if some of these pieces get a little cut oddly a second time, and you can just go ahead and push on through your slicing and dicing and not worry about those results. Okay, but certainly, yes, if the visual appeal, right, is part of the finished product is important, and also the even cooking in some cases, of these cut pieces, then the only solution that I'm aware of is to clean the blade every slice or two as needed. Thank you. And from Maria, hello. I'm new to the whole food plant-based diet. Instead of eating meat, what is a good protein source to eat? Consistently a good source of the amino acids that make up proteins is going to be beans and legumes and other members of that group of foods. And there are many to choose from. Whether it's garbanzo beans or black beans or mung beans or something else. Folks around the world historically have those that are plant-based have reached for these beans, peas, legumes that come in a pod, right? In some fashion or another. In fact, what you will often see is a meal arrangement where you've got some sort of a bean preparation, along with a grain, whatever the local staple food is. It could be a whole grain. Very often it's milled into a flour and then something is made, right? It could be a flat bread that's unleavened. It may be a leavened bread. It could be a noodle. And so you've got these two categories of foods that are often served together, at least historically. And then you've got a secondary vegetable or other preparations that round out the meal. But this is a very common eating pattern still today throughout the world. And just to give an example, if we were to look at a common, maybe a stereotypical meal from India of dal, which is simmered legume preparation, and bhat or rice. You will sometimes find a similar bean preparation that's paired with chapati or roti, which are wheat-based flatbreads. And in a place like Mexico, you'll come across beans of some sort that might be paired with corn tortillas. And so these are examples of how these staples are represented around the world. And keep in mind that protein, right? Our body synthesizes protein from the foods we eat. And what our body is taking in are the amino acids, which form the building blocks of protein for our bodies. And so, we can get these various and sundry amino acids from different foods across the meal and across the day of consumption. Okay. So while meat, right, and meat products, or animal-derived products like eggs, provide what's called a complete protein, all of the essential amino acids. There's a relatively small subset of plant foods that do. Hence, it's important to eat a variety of foods when we're subsisting on a plant-based diet. Okay, that's always the guideline. That's always the advice. And not to mention the variation tastes good as well. So, the only folks that I can think of that either I've met or I've studied through case studies that are plant-based and have suffered some ill health in terms of malnutrition, it was due to an unusually narrow diet that they were eating. Now, I'm not talking about folks that have some special health condition. I'm talking about most of the people, most of the time. Okay. And, you have nuts and seeds as well that are a good source of those amino acids that go into protein synthesis in our bodies. Okay. And but start out with the category of beans and legumes and peas. And think about nuts as well. Be careful of the high fat content of nuts and seeds, however. And then add lots of other things to your table so you are getting a full array of nutrients. Thank you. All right. Another question from Maria. Now that I'm on a whole food plant-based diet, I'm having trouble knowing what to cook for family or visitors. Can you make any suggestions? Yeah, cook whatever you plan to eat, and whatever is going to be good for you will be good for your family and friends as well. And uh, the important thing is to handle the food properly, and this is where the Rouxbe approach focuses on cooking methods and the supporting techniques in preparing food. And if we can understand how to roast and grill and saute and steam and simmer and do these other things that are very basic to food handling, then we can move to that next level of flavor development, where we start to add herbs and spices and other things, other ingredients, to really make that food appealing to our palate, or to the palate of our audience that we're cooking for. Okay, and this can take some time if we're new to the kitchen, or new to cooking in this way. It takes practice, just as anything else would take practice. Whether you want to be the best basketball player in town or a great pianist, all of this takes practice. Okay, and food is a very complex and big world to work with. But given some diligence and some engagement with the process, you will make leaps and bounds in your knowledge base and your skill development, as the weeks go by. Okay, but to come back around and to address your question again, there's no reason why you can't learn to produce delicious food that's plant-based, that people can enjoy. And there's no reason why family and your visitors, can't enjoy plant-based foods. For those that resist it, you have some options. Maybe you choose to wean them, off of meat and toward an all-plant menu, or perhaps you offer one item with some meat in it, while the other 5 on the table are plant-based. But a big part of it is psychological. Okay, for those that are or have been eating meat and now transitioning to plant-based foods, whether it's understanding where proteins come from and how the body makes them, or whether it's flavor development. Okay, a lot of it is mental, because there are people every day around the world that live on a plant-based diet and do it happily, including feeding their family and friends. Okay, so please enjoy the process. Thank you. And look at that, another question from Maria. I'm trying to like cooking instead of getting stressed out every time I cook. How can I get over this? I want to enjoy cooking, even living a very busy life. Yes. So, number one, as I just mentioned in the previous question, practice makes better. And, with any endeavor, right, the better you get at it, the less stressful it is. And the same absolutely holds true with cooking and food handling. And, when it comes to working in cooking into a busy day, we talk about batch cooking, the basic principle of batch cooking, which means to prepare a staple food item, especially one that can take some time to cook, such as simmering beans, right, or cooking whole grains, which can be a little time consuming, especially after a busy day at the office. And so we would prepare these ahead of time, such as on a Sunday afternoon, in preparation for the week ahead of us. And it's up to you as to how much you want to cook. You might choose to cook enough food to get you through the next 5 days, all the way till the next weekend. Or you might choose to make enough to get you through just 2 or 3 days. And then maybe you will cook up again a batch of beans or grains on Wednesday evening. So that's up to you. But the idea is to cook these staple items that can then be used to make different preparations. So you can cook up some pinto beans and use some of those to go into tacos. The next day, you can use some of those to go into a soup. And then, you might use what's left on Wednesday night to go with some pasta. And so in that way, right, you're saving yourself some time, that hour and a half of cooking beans each night, right? Instead, it's just rolled into one prep event on Sunday afternoon. So that's the basis of batch cooking. And so if you can incorporate batch cooking and apply it to different food items such that you can reach for these 2 or 3 or 4 things on any given night and more quickly assemble a meal, then you're going to find greater joy in cooking. Okay, so there is efficiency, in other words. Okay, now a big part of this also is going to be knife skill development. And in all of our courses, whether it's for the home cook or for the professional cook, we have lessons on knife skill development. And boy, I tell you, if that might be the most important thing to develop, when it comes to efficient prep and quicker meal preparation, and then also more fun, more joy, right, in the cooking process. Okay, so with practice, with a sharp knife and with a decent quality knife, you're going to build confidence and speed, right, and accuracy on the knife. So all of these things are going to be part of your homework. All right, enjoy the process. All right, Janet says, like Maria, I too would get stressed in the kitchen, especially when company is coming. I'm now taking Ruby's basic cooking course. It is making all the difference in cooking. Thanks, Ruby. Excellent. I could not have said it better myself. Maria, I hope to see your knife cut assignments in your assignment in your course pretty soon here. Thank you. All right, and thank you, Janet. And another question from Ingrid, who says, I love doing meal prep, so it takes no time to do my food. Is there any way to better preserve pre-cut vegetables like onion, cilantro, and bell pepper in the fridge once they are a fine brunoise or diced? Okay, so this is an interesting question. And, this raises some concerns for students from the standpoint of nutrients. I occasionally have a student that will write in and say, if you're cutting vegetables ahead of time, don't they lose nutrients? And the quick answer there is probably so, to some extent or another. It may be a little bit, it may be lots, I'm not sure. But also they start to degrade, right? The more cuts you have, right, the more surface area that's been cut on the food, the quicker it's going to degrade, even in the refrigerator. And certainly there's some mitigation that's possible. Number one, just make sure your refrigerator is at the best temperature setting, which is often in the high 30s degrees Fahrenheit, and then also cover up your food items with something that's airtight, whether it's a snap, fitting lid or plastic wrap, in order to protect the food from the air circulation in the refrigerator. Fundamentally, a refrigerator removes moisture from that box. And so very quickly, dehydration sets in. And this is often very easily noticeable with a bell pepper. You might put a bell pepper from the grocery store in the fridge, and just overnight, you'll notice wrinkles on the surface. And this is due to the dehydrating effect of the refrigerator. And certainly if that bell pepper is cut into smaller pieces, that action is going to be even faster. So we want to keep it, those cut foods in containers so that it's protected okay, from the air circulation. But also, once foods are cut, they change. Textures change, flavors shift, and it's just not the same food. And from my perspective, there are some things that I opt not to pre-cut, and things like onions and garlic fall into that category, as are fresh herbs, because they tend to break down pretty quickly. And instead, I would consider pre-rinsing those things, drying them off as needed, then storing them in the refrigerator, so that when it comes time to prep a meal, I can quickly pull that item out and start in on my work. Okay. So try those couple of things, Ingrid, and see if storage makes a difference. Sometimes, in that container that we store cut vegetables, you might put a damp towel in there and then cover it up, which will maintain some of that moisture in that environment. Or see if you can arrange your meal prep sessions each day so that you are very quickly dicing the quantity of onions that you need, or the garlic or the fresh herbs, in order to maintain maximum freshness. Okay, that's my approach. Thank you. All right, Alexandra. It says, I thought this class was only vegan. Why are you talking about pork? So, Alexandra, welcome to my office hours. This is a time where we open up this Q&A time for all of our students. And we have students that are plant-based. We have students that eat animals. We have students that are somewhere in between, transitioning in one direction or another. And so please, understand, right, the format of the office hours. Thank you. All right. And Diane says, how do you roast cut vegetables without oil so they keep their moisture but also brown? Thanks. That's difficult. In our couple of our big courses, FOK is one, and ProPlant is another. We talk about no oil roasting, and part of that is to add through the process, a couple of times or more, to perhaps add a little bit of moisture to slow down the drying process, while still allowing that dry heat environment to develop some browning on the surface. And that's going to be true of, sauteing. No oil saute would follow a fundamentally similar approach. Okay. Now, as we take on different ways of handling food, things change. Okay. And, a dry heat cooking method, such as sauteing or roasting without the addition of oil, is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to with the addition of oil. Okay. So this is in part some skill development as we experiment and kind of do this addition of moisture, letting it dry. Add some more moisture, let it dry. Add some more moisture, let it dry. We go through this cycle, okay, of developing some color and adding back moisture to mitigate the dehydration. But the other side of this is the psychological component of accepting that we're doing something different and that we should expect some different results. Okay. And so keep both of those things in mind, as you approach these new ways of food handling. Thank you. And Mary Jo says, can you discuss the advantage or disadvantage of having meat or chicken rest after being baked? The basic premise of resting a roast, typically, sometimes it's smaller cuts, but this primarily is going to apply to larger cuts. is that the moisture tends to move toward the center of that roast, and by resting it, it relaxes, and the moisture starts to redistribute. And we have examples in our courses where we show a roast that's cut into immediately after being removed from the oven, and there's some moisture loss compared to having allowed it to rest and having that internal moisture sort of redistribute throughout the roast. As you slice into it, there's less loss of moisture and more of it is being held by the tissue. Okay, so that's going to be the advantage, and especially with roasts, that's going to be the standard procedure for handling that. For smaller cuts, whether it's an individual steak, maybe a chicken breast, typically the time from oven to table is enough time to allow that to occur. Often we're not concerned about resting those small cuts. Okay, individual preferences might vary, however. Okay, thank you. All right, Ingrid, I bought 5 oil sprays, packages. All are in the trash. Now, number 1, they did not spray at all. Okay, in droplets. I think these fine droplets that maybe you were expecting. They spilled a lot while spraying, and 3, they got stuck. Is oil spraying without additives possible? Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I'm the best one to answer this. I will tell you my little experience with oil sprayers is that they do get gummy. Sometimes sooner or later, and that sounds like that's what you're experiencing here. Is there a foolproof technology or packaged product out there? I'm not sure. But Ingrid, if you would like to send this question in to support@rouxbe.com, I'd be happy to circulate this among my teammates on the instructional team here, and see if anyone has a different perspective, some different experience that we can share with you. Thank you. Okay, Diane writes, are there foods you can cook and eat to help one decrease the craving for sweets, including dried fruit? Wow, cravings for sweets. I should know this because I've got all of my teeth are sweet tooths. And so, one thing that has brought me satisfaction is the sweet potato. Okay, and I'll eat these. I eat them probably most months out of the year. Sometimes I fall off the wagon and don't roast them for a while. Maybe it's because of the hot summer days that I don't want to turn on the oven. But I find that natural sweetness to be satisfying, and the fiber from that food is also satiating. So that's what I would consider. And there are many sweet potatoes on the market, and each one has its own personality. They have different levels of sweetness. They have different textures, different moisture contents, and I would recommend that you give them all a try and maybe settle upon a couple of them that are favorites for you and see how you like that. Okay. Other things, could be like soy milk. I had a student years ago who was a monk in Thailand for about 10 years before he left the monastery, came to Portland, Oregon to study cooking. I was blessed to have met him. Among the conversations we had and the information that he shared with me was that, one of the things that the monks did was drink soy milk to keep cravings down. And this was largely hunger cravings generally. But I have adopted that. and I do that every once in a while. But I noticed that it's good for everything, at least for me. And I prefer to get a soy milk that is just soybeans and water. So nothing with any sweeteners added to it. I go to nearby Asian grocery stores. That's where I tend to find what I think is probably the best quality product that has two ingredients: soybeans and water. And there's some sweetness to it, uh, and um, and I find it satisfying. And maybe you will too. I hope you'll give that a try. Okay, but think about fiber. Okay, carrots. Okay, celery. I like to use those as little dippers for hummus or other bean purees that I make. I'm a big fan of beans. I must have them every day, probably for a couple of meals at least. I had some for breakfast this morning, as a matter of fact. And so, to combine the beans themselves, which are going to be satisfying, but with something that's sweet like carrots and celery, can be satisfying to that sweet component that you're addressing. I hope you'll give it a try. Thank you. All right, from Ingrid, following Mary Jo's question, what happens to me is that when resting meats, they get cold, losing temperature to be served. Is microwaving a solution? So, yeah, this is one of those concerns, and so we recommend a technique called tenting, and this is where you get a piece of foil and you place it over the meat like a tent. You can tear open a little hole to allow some steam to escape if you want to do that. That's an option. But otherwise, you don't have to do that. You can just cover the product. It could be plastic wrap, but again, the old culinary term is tenting, and that'll hold in the heat for those. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 10 or 15 minutes. While it's resting. Now, another thing that I have done is to hold it. If I'm not doing any more oven work, I'll hold that roast in the oven with it off. And the door open. There's some residual heat in the oven that will keep the roast warm without further cooking. Beyond the carryover cooking, which is already part of what happens with a roast. Okay, and so give that a try. So is microwaving a solution? So microwaving, perhaps it can be. You got to be very, very delicate because a microwave works very quickly, and it can very easily further cook an item, especially smaller items. And maybe I should say not even smaller items, but microwave ovens tend to produce hot spots, and so you get further cooking and overcooking in these hot spots. So maybe not the best choice, but if you can find a way to use it to your advantage, then it could be a solution. Okay, give it a try. Thank you. Next up from Ashar. With the addition of gluten-free soy sauce to grocery shelves, do you think it will create the same flavors as tamari? The gluten-free soy sauce uses rice rather than wheat. Thank you and happy 2024. Thank you, Shar. And yeah, this is a great question. And so I'm going to start off by saying that, as we make a change to food production, or whether it's producing soy sauce in a factory, or if it's preparing something at home and we make ingredient substitutions, if we're making a change, we can reasonably expect the end result to be different from what we started with, and I think that's fair. All right. Now, with something like gluten-free soy sauce, it's going to be close. It's going to be similar to the original, and I think it's going to work for most people most of the time. If you come from an environment or an upbringing where you become very finicky about soy sauce, then you might notice the difference more readily. Okay. And then, so to that, I would say that still, if you're in a position where you have decided to make the change for whatever reason to a gluten-free version of soy sauce, then with that change must come the mental change as well. And that means allowing yourself to enjoy this new version of the product, or the new version of the food that you prepare. Okay. I'm a believer when it comes to so many things in life that 90% of it is mental, and the other 10% is just doing it, right? Sometimes just getting out of the bed and having the motivation to start a project, right, is 90% mental. Allowing ourselves to enjoy a new food or flavor is often mental. It tastes different from what we grew up with. It tastes different from what our expectation is. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means we need to allow ourselves to get used to it. Now, again, I'm not talking about folks that have an allergy, right, or some other condition, right, that creates an undesirable reaction. I'm talking about most of us, most of the time, as we deal with change. Okay. Thank you, Shar, and look forward to talking again. All right. Ingrid, how can I avoid crying when chopping onions? It sounded like I was asking you that question, but I was reading your question, and I'll try to answer your question. And, practically speaking, I don't know a perfect solution. Okay. I've heard of people, I guess I've tried these things too, but I've heard of people, putting an onion in the freezer for several minutes just to chill it down so that when you cut into it, the molecular activity is kind of toned down. And so you don't get all this stuff in your eyes. Maybe that works a little bit. Is it convenient? Not for me. Maybe a sharper knife works. Certain varieties of onions are stronger or more mild. So you might do some experimenting and choose your onions. I'll share a quick story with you. In the past, when I taught at on-ground culinary schools, this question would come up. And what I experimented with, and what I kid you not, what I demoed in front of my student was I would wrap my head in plastic wrap and poke a hole in my mouth so I could breathe. And then I would demonstrate my knife cuts on the onions. And that was the most effective way to keep my eyes from watering, from crying. And but if you're going to do that at home, let everybody know what you're planning on doing, so you don't frighten anybody. I'm afraid it might prompt a call to the local police department, because you'll look frightening. Okay, but anyway, give those a try, either the freezing or the sharp knife or the plastic wrap, and see what you think. Thanks. Okay, Debbie. Hi. Can you please explain the difference between old-fashioned rolled oats and sprouted oats? I did not know if the sprouted oats follow FOK. Thanks. So rolled oats, old-fashioned, this term old-fashioned rolled oats came about in response to instant sort of rolled oats, which are very quick cooking, very, very thin, powdery sort of oats. The old-fashioned oats, are very simply just oats that have been rolled. They're usually a little bit thicker, right, and more substantial than the instant oats. But now comparing it to sprouted oats are going to be oat groats or oat berries that have been soaked in water and drained and then allowed to sprout, right, as if they are growing again. And what that does is it creates a different nutrient profile, okay, for that seed. And there's more enzymes and things that are available for us when we consume it. And so that's the difference between, the traditional or typical oat and a sprouted oat. Okay. And, otherwise, I don't find flavors to be different. Give them a try and see how you like them. Thank you. Jane says, do you need to defrost frozen vegetables before using in a stir fry? So yeah, this is a good question. It's a simple question, it seems, but it's a good question. So on one hand, no, you can if you're going to be combining some vegetables in a hot pan with some other flavorful ingredients to create something, you can certainly put frozen vegetables directly in the pan. They will freeze, they will warm up, and the freeze thaw cycle will already soften up that product, so that it's often relatively tender to begin with once it thaws. So on one hand, you can go ahead and put it in the pan and continue with your cooking process. Now, on the other hand, if you want to more closely follow the principles of a stir fry or of a saute, part of that cooking method is to maintain a hot pan. Now, if you're adding frozen vegetables or even very wet vegetables in any quantity to a hot pan, it's going to draw down that temperature immediately. And then there's going to be some what we call recovery time before that pan temperature comes up again. And you can resume the cooking that could characterize a saute or stir fry. But very often, the process is compromised. Because unless you're on a commercial burner with some really high BTUs, you're not going to be able to bring that pan up to temperature in a way that defines that cooking method. Okay, so if you want to be a stickler and talk about stir frying, then no, don't use frozen vegetables. But if you want to just talk more generally about creating a dish in the pan, that's going to taste good, then sure, you can add frozen vegetables to the pan. Okay, give it a try. See how you like the results. That's going to be the most important thing. Okay, if you are hired at a Chinese restaurant, they would tell you what to do and what not to do. And adding frozen vegetables to the pan is probably what they don't want you to do. If you're cooking at home, find the best solution, okay, for you and your family and your friends. Thank you. All right, Pavel says, we've moved and now have a disappointing electric stove that constantly cycles on and off. I bought 2 butane stoves, but both are extremely hot. Can you recommend any gas stoves for gentle simmering? Wow. Okay, so you've really touched upon some of the stuff that I'm familiar with. Let's see here. Butane stoves, I'm guessing it's going to be the smaller canisters you're talking about. The other area of experience that I have is going to be on a larger grill, like an outdoor, barbecue style grill, which uses, at least around here, propane. Sometimes we can get it plumbed for natural gas at the house. That can be a nice way to do some cooking. If outdoors is comfortable and possible for you. And I know that there are a lot of possible variables that could make that challenging. Let's see. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Otherwise, it sounds like your electric stove just does its own thing, cycling off and on, which you're not in control of. Now, otherwise, for other people cooking on electric range, the way we do this, if you need some high heat and you kind of get into this rhythm of cooking and sauteing, and you need to control the heat, and this is what we do in restaurants that have electric ranges, and there are actually some of those out there. We turn the coils up on high, and so they're glowing red, heat up that pan, and then get our product in there and start doing our saute work. when the pan gets too hot, we just move the pan off the fire, and we can monitor it, stir it, pan toss, whatever you need to do, and then bring it back onto the fire to continue that cooking process as needed. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But in case of your situation, Pavel, it sounds like it's just cycling on and off out of your control, which indeed would be disappointing. But yeah, I hope that perhaps the idea of an outdoor grill might be an option. You might also look at some of the other electric, technology that could possibly be an option. You can buy some portable electric units that are very effective. Check it out. See what you think. Thank you. Okay, and Sue says, hello, hi there. Do you prefer being an instructor or personal chef? Could you share about it? Thanks, Ruby. I am really looking forward to increasing my skills. Oh, they can both be fun. They're very, very different experiences. As a personal chef, which I've done off and on a few times, you develop a relationship with a certain group of people, whether it's a couple or a family, whatever the situation is. And you can, I guess there's different situations. One, you can offer your menu and just do it your way. I've been in that situation as well as a situation where, I cooked according to more input from my clients. And that can be fine, provided you're comfortable with food handling and, how to handle rabbit if they want to eat rabbit, or, squash raviolis, or, making the pasta, or whatever that request happens to be. Okay. On the other hand, if you are creating your own menu and offering that to your client and saying, hey, you choose from this list, then you have more control. And you can offer things that you're more confident in making, things where your skills are more dialed in, and you can really create the best of in that category. On the other hand, being an instructor can be very rewarding. If you're into the education, into the sharing and the teaching part of things. I have done this for the general public. I've taught a number of times at Bob's Red Mill in their educational kitchen on campus in Milwaukee, Oregon, as well as at on the ground schools, here in Portland, whether that was the Le Cordon Bleu campus in Portland, or the Art Institute of Portland, also a stint at Oregon Culinary Institute. And so those are all very different. Those two categories are different, but rewarding in their own way. Think about what turns you on. What you like to do. I like food in all sort of settings, and I don't mind doing catering, which is part of that as well. And you can step in and provide food to somebody, while also sharing about the food, the culture, the history, the techniques that you're applying, and some of the different ways of handling that given food. And so there's definitely some crossover as well between these different endeavors. All right. Thank you. Okay. Richard says, what's the difference between canned beans and beans cooked from scratch, in your opinion? Very often it's salt content. Right, where many beans have salt, but if you can find them that are unsalted, then they become more equivalent. Beans from the can are often, cooked to a pretty common degree of doneness, which is pretty soft. It's at a point where it'll hold its shape, but it tends to be pretty soft. Whereas if you're cooking, you're soaking dry beans and cooking your own, you have some more control over that, depending on what it is that you want to prepare. I also think about preservatives. Many canned foods or processed in this manner foods have a preservative of some sort added to the bottle, the can, the bag, and um, preservatives, I think, are um, the elephant in the room when it comes to health, long-term health, that uh, people aren't talking about that much. Arguably, we would benefit from some more research, perhaps, on the effects of preservatives on health long term. But I'm not going to wait for those results. I believe that they do not enhance my health, and so I prefer to take an avenue when possible where I'm taking in fewer of those preservatives, whatever they are. And so that would be a difference for me, at least to consider when I was looking at canned beans in this case. Thank you. All right. Jane says, do you have a recommendation for cooling foods down before putting in the fridge, such as soups, etc.? Is this a concern? Yes. When we talk about food safety and sanitation, which is part of any culinary course, any culinary program, that is one of the first topics we cover. And the way that we handle these hot, items is to put them into a shallow container to maximize surface area, and then that's going to, allow heat to dissipate, and then we do that at room temperature usually for a while. It could be an hour, for example, and then we can put that into the refrigerator. We can recontainerize it as needed, and then put it into the refrigerator. If it's a smaller amount of food, very often we can just put it in the container and then put it into the refrigerator, and that's okay. All right. But larger quantities of hot items that go into the refrigerator will increase the temperature inside that box, inside your refrigerator, and it'll compromise everything else. Okay. They might not go bad immediately, but their shelf lives will decrease as a result of their exposure to the higher temperature in the refrigerator. So that's a big reason why we want to avoid putting large quantities of hot things in the fridge. The other one is for that given hot item. If we have something that is in a container like this and it's hot, it's going to take a while for that very center of the container, the food in the container, to come down to a safe temperature. So all the while the outside might be cool to the touch, it might seem fine, bacteria is multiplying in the center where it's still warm. And that can pose a concern, right? And the typical concern is one of spoilage. The most common scenario is going to be spoilage, right? We always have yeasts and bacteria in our environment, on our hands, on our containers. It's just the way of life. And those things hasten the spoilage of food. They decrease the shelf life of food. It could be mold that results, or something else, depending on what it is that's infected the food. However, what we usually talk about is a foodborne illness, as in a disease like salmonella or botulism or Norwalk disease or something like that. Yes, those are concerns, but they're a much, much, much smaller concern. The reason why we talk about those foodborne diseases more often than spoilage is because the consequences can be dire. It's not unusual for a person to die. Whereas if it's spoilage bacteria, you might get a stomachache and diarrhea, and that's it. You're going to be over it in a few hours. So the keep in mind that as far, I'm kind of on a food safety and sanitation tangent here. Pardon me, but it is a favorite topic of mine. Keep in mind that one of the and perhaps the number one culprit when it comes to transmission of these other microorganisms, that these unusual but very devastating microorganisms, is going to be the hands via cross-contamination. Also keep in mind that a common mechanism in transferring these microorganisms to us, is the fecal oral contamination, which means after going to the bathroom and wiping the tail end, someone didn't wash their hands or didn't wash their hands properly, and it ends up getting into the food and then into our mouths and into our gut. And so that's often what's happening. Think about that. But anyway, yes, by all means, cool your food, store it in the refrigerator. And then the other part of this is to reheat the food properly. And in most cases, that means heating foods to 165 degrees Fahrenheit until it's heated all the way through, at which point, most of these microorganisms are going to be killed off. The populations will drop. We can safely eat the food. Okay. So maybe a longer-winded answer than expected, but hopefully that provides some context. Thank you. And bad and cleanup. We've got Cynthia with the last two questions here. I have a recipe for a baked sweet potato pie that calls for tapioca flour. I have oat, almond, and chickpea flour. Do you think I could use the oat flour to substitute for the tapioca flour? Maybe. I'm not sure. I say maybe because tapioca flour is sticky, and it's going to provide some structure to that pie that you're making. And oat flour also has a stickiness to it, right? So it might be able to act as a substitute for the tapioca flour. Certainly better than the other two options, I would say. So give that a try and see how you like the results. And then the last one here from Cynthia. I've heard boiling sweet potatoes is probably the healthiest way to cook them. I do like to steam, as I can control keeping the temp low, and boiling, I can overcook them. Your comments for either. Folks around the world steam, they simmer, they roast in a dry heat environment directly over the fire or in an oven, in the sand, hot sand. So there's different ways of cooking sweet potatoes, and I've had them all, and they all taste delicious, albeit a little different from one another. I would say do what is best for you, and enjoy the fruits of your labor. All right, thank you. And that brings us to the end of today's program. Thank you very much for joining me today to kick off this new year. And I look forward to seeing you at the next live event. And until then, happy cooking.